In the twilight hour, where the day's last breath turns into night's silent embrace, Alex stood before his new beginning. The Victorian mansion loomed large, its silhouette against the sky like a relic of a bygone era. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and overgrowth, the garden a testament to nature's relentless reclamation of the forgotten. Alex had driven for hours to reach this secluded spot, the landscape changing from bustling city to quiet, rural tranquility. Each mile had peeled away layers of his old life, leaving him raw, open to the whispers of solitude. His divorce had left him with a need for space, a place to heal away from the echoes of what once was. This house, with its history and isolation, seemed the perfect sanctuary, or perhaps an escape. He approached the door, keys in hand, the metal cold and unyielding. The door creaked as he pushed it open, a sound that seemed to resonate through the empty halls, as if announcing his arrival to unseen inhabitants. Inside, the air was cooler, carrying a mustiness that spoke of years of closed windows and undisturbed dust. The entryway was grand, with a chandelier that reached down like a skeletal hand, its crystals dulled by time. The floorboards groaned under his weight, each step a reminder of the house's age. Max trotted beside him, his nose to the ground, sniffing out stories buried in the dust. As Alex moved through the rooms, he catalogued the signs of neglect. The wallpaper peeling in the corners, revealing layers of history, furniture draped in white sheets like ghosts of the past, and the library where books seemed to slump on their shelves, their spines begging to be read. He felt the weight of the house's history, not just in its physical decay, but in the atmosphere, a palpable sense of being watched, of histories untold. The kitchen, with its old stove and a table that could have hosted a Victorian dinner party, had an aura of abandonment. Yet in the midst of this decay, there was something else, a vibrancy in the air, as if the house was holding its breath, waiting for new life to fill its rooms. Max's behavior had piqued Alex's curiosity. The dog, usually at ease in new environments, seemed on edge, his tail not. As the first night in the ancient mansion unfolded, Alex found himself in the master bedroom, a room that whispered of times when life was slower, and secrets were kept behind locked doors. The room's high ceilings were adorned with elaborate, though now faded plasterwork, scenes of pastoral bliss that seemed to watch over him as he prepared for sleep. The air was still, heavy with the scent of aged wood and old books, a library nearby perhaps contributing to the musty aroma. Alex had chosen this room for its size and the comforting presence of the large arched window that offered a view of the moonlit garden. The bed, an imposing piece of furniture, creaked softly under his weight, a sound that echoed in the vast space, reminding him of the house's solitude. He settled in, pulling the heavy bedspread over himself, the fabric cool against his skin, as if it had absorbed the room's chill. Max, with an instinctual understanding that this was a place of rest, had leapt onto the bed, his usual enthusiasm dampened by an unusual vigilance. As Alex turned off the lamp, the room enveloped them in darkness, the kind that seems to have depth, to have layers. The moonlight cast long, eerie shadows, some of which seemed to move with a life of their own, perhaps just the play of light, but unnerving nonetheless. The silence was profound, the kind that made the ears strain for any sound, any sign of life. Alex's mind, still racing from the day's journey and the weight of his life's recent upheavals, fought against the pull of sleep. When he finally succumbed, his rest was fitful, dreams intermingling with the house's creaks and sighs, as if the mansion itself was speaking to him in a language of echoes and whispers. He awoke with a start, the sensation of being watched startling him from sleep. His eyes opened to Max, whose gaze was fixed with an intensity that was almost palpable, staring at a specific point on the ceiling where the shadows gathered like dark clouds. The room felt colder, the air thick with an unexplained tension. The clock on the nightstand read 3:17 a.m., a time that felt arbitrary, yet significant in the depth of night. Alex tried to rationalize his unease. Perhaps it was just Max reacting to a strange environment. Or maybe there was a draft causing the shadows to dance in a way that seemed alive. But the longer he lay there, the more he felt the weight of unseen eyes upon him. He whispered Max's name, seeking comfort from his companion, but Max's tail did not wag. Instead, it gave a single, slow thump, his eyes never straying from that corner. Alex reached out, feeling the fur of his dog, grounding himself in the tangible. Max's body was rigid, his ears pricked, alert to something beyond the physical. The room seemed to hold its breath, the silence now a living entity, pressing against Alex's senses. He turned his gaze to the spot where Max stared, trying to pierce the darkness with his own eyes. The shadows there were denser, a void that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. A chill ran through him, not just from the room's temperature, but from the creeping realization that perhaps they were not alone. As he watched, the shadows seemed to shift, not with the natural sway of light, but with purpose, as if something was moving just out of sight. The air grew colder, making Alex's breath visible in small ghostly puffs. He felt an urge to flee, to run from the room, from the house, but the weight of the night held him, curiosity and fear entwined. Alex sat up, the bed springs protesting with a loud creak that shattered the silence. He half expected something to respond from the shadows, but there was only the sound of his own breathing, now ragged with apprehension. He turned on the lamp, its light harsh, banishing the shadows, but not the feeling of watchfulness. Max finally looked at him, his eyes reflecting a mix of concern and something else, something akin to warning. Alex couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had been watching them had merely retreated, waiting for the cover of darkness to return. He lay back down, the light on, but sleep was elusive, his mind now alert to every creak of the house, every whisper of the wind outside. The moon had moved, its light now casting different, less ominous patterns, but the memory of the night's watchfulness lingered, a silent promise that this house was more than just a place to rest. It was a place where the past was not just remembered, it was alive, watching from the shadows. The nights began to blend into one another, each marked by the same unsettling pattern. Alex had settled into a routine, the initial excitement of the move giving way to the daily rhythms of life in his new solitary existence. Yet with every night, the house seemed to assert its presence more deeply into his consciousness, not just through its physical decay, but through a more intangible connection. Max, his loyal companion, became the fulcrum of this connection. His behavior during the day was typical. He explored, played, and followed Alex around with his usual enthusiasm. But as night fell, a transformation occurred. Max would position himself at the foot of the bed, his body tense, his eyes locked on a particular corner of the ceiling, where shadows gathered like a congregation of whispers. The first few nights, Alex had dismissed it as Max adjusting to the new environment, perhaps hearing a rodent or reacting to the unfamiliar sounds of an old house. But as the days turned into weeks, the pattern became undeniable. It wasn't just a passing curiosity, it was a vigil, one that Max took upon himself with a seriousness that bordered on the solemn. Each night Alex would watch Max. In the pale moonlight, Max's eyes would gleam with an eerie intensity, his gaze unwavering. The room, bathed in the soft glow, would seem to watch back, the shadows playing tricks, moving subtly as if in response to Max's scrutiny. Alex found himself unable to shake the sensation of being observed, not just by Max, but by something else, something that shared their space. When Alex tried to coax Max's attention away, the dog would only glance at him momentarily, his eyes returning to the spot with a dogged determination. "What do you see, boy?" Alex would whisper, his voice a soft echo in the vastness of the room. But Max offered no answers, just his unwavering stare. The moon's phases came and went, and with them the character of the room changed. On nights when the moon was full, the ceiling corner where Max looked seemed almost to pulse with a darker shadow, as if something was about to emerge from the woodwork. On new moon nights, when darkness was complete, Max's vigil was even more pronounced, his fur standing on end, suggesting a presence felt rather than seen. Alex began to document these nights, not just in his mind but on paper. He kept a journal beside his bed, noting the time Max started his watch, any changes in his behavior, the phase of the moon, and his own feelings. Each entry was a step further into the mystery of the widow's watch, each note a thread in the tapestry of his growing unease. Max's reaction wasn't just vigilance, it was protective, as if he sensed a threat or perhaps a sadness that needed guarding. Alex, in turn, felt a growing responsibility, not just for Max, but for whatever or whoever lingered in the shadows. His nights became filled with dreams that felt like memories, not his own, but belonging to the house, as if it was trying to communicate through the only medium it had left. One night, under the light of a desk lamp, Alex decided to stay up to watch with Max. The room, under the stark light, lost some of its mystery, but not its presence. Max's behavior didn't change. He continued to stare, his fur occasionally ruffling, as if a breeze touched him, though no windows were open. Alex's eyes followed Max's gaze, trying to pierce the shadows to see what Max saw. He felt the air grow colder, a physical sensation that confirmed his suspicions. This wasn't just a dog being alert. There was something there, something that responded to their presence, to their attention. As the night wore on, Alex's mind wandered through theories. Was it a spirit bound to the house by some unfinished business? A residual energy, a memory of a life once lived within these walls? Or was it something more, a guardian or perhaps a prisoner of the mansion's history? The pattern wasn't just in Max's behavior, but in the house itself. It seemed to breathe, to live through these nightly vigils. The creaks and groans of the wood, the whispers in the wind outside, they all seemed to align with Max's watch, as if the house was using Max's sensitivity to communicate, to express something it couldn't in daylight. Alex felt the weight of this pattern, the unspoken dialogue between Max and the house. He decided then that he couldn't let this persist unanswered. If there was something or someone there, they deserved acknowledgement, perhaps even resolution. The nights of watching had transformed into a puzzle he was compelled to solve, not out of fear, but out of a need to understand, to connect with the history and the essence of the widow's watch. As dawn approached, casting the first light into the room, Max finally relaxed, his body slumping as if the tension of the night had lifted. Alex lay back, his mind racing with plans, with the resolve to delve deeper into the mystery. The house, with its patterns and secrets, had woven itself into the fabric of his life, and now he was part of its story. In the dim light of early morning, Alex was already at work, his mind consumed by the need to understand the night's mysteries. The room, with its antiquated charm and the palpable weight of years, felt like a stage waiting for the actors to reveal themselves. Max, who had been unusually vigilant the previous night, lay beside Alex, his eyes occasionally darting to that same corner of the ceiling, as if he knew something was unfinished between them and the unseen. Alex had decided that Night's watch would not be left to the unreliable testimony of his senses alone. He needed evidence, something tangible to confront the growing fear that perhaps he wasn't alone in this house. With Max by his side, he carefully unpacked a state-of-the-art night vision camera, its modern design stark against the backdrop of the room's antique furniture. The camera was his tool for demystifying the dark, for bringing light to the shadows that seemed to harbor secrets. He positioned it on a sturdy tripod, ensuring it had a clear view of the entire room, especially the bed and the mysterious corner where Max's gaze had lingered. The camera's infrared light gave the room an eerie glow, turning the once inviting space into a scene from a sci-fi movie. He checked the settings, ensuring the camera would record in high resolution, capturing even the slightest movement. The digital clock on the camera blinked 9:43 a.m., a reminder that day was still with him, but night would come, and with it, the answers or perhaps more questions. As he worked, Alex's thoughts were a tumult of scientific skepticism and the primal fear of the unknown. He spoke softly to Max, his voice a mix of reassurance for them both. "We'll see what's really there, won't we, boy?" Once the camera was set, Alex turned his attention to the room itself. It was as if the house was holding a collective breath, waiting for the reveal of its secrets. He moved around, removing some of the dust sheets from the furniture, revealing the craftsmanship of the past beneath layers of time. Each piece told a story, from the ornate carvings on the dresser to the delicate patterns on the bedside table. The bed, with its heavy wooden frame and deep red bedspread, seemed to exude a history of its own, perhaps holding the echoes of those who had slept there before. Alex couldn't help but imagine their stories, their dreams and their fears, wondering if they too had felt this house's silent watchfulness. He paused at the window, looking out into the overgrown garden, the sunlight casting shadows that danced with the leaves. It was a stark contrast to the night's oppressive gloom, yet even in the day, the house had an air of secrecy. He wondered what the camera would reveal when darkness fell again. The rest of the day was spent in preparation and distraction, Alex diving into books he found in the library, each one pulling him further into the lore of the house. Max, for his part, seemed to relax more as the day progressed, perhaps reassured by the presence of his master or the absence of whatever had been watching them. As dusk approached, Alex returned to the bedroom, the camera now a sentinel against the night. He checked its battery, its memory card, ensuring everything was ready to document whatever the night had in store. The camera's digital screen showed a live feed, the room now bathed in green, the bed, the furniture, the corner, all waiting for the night's curtain to rise. Max took his place at the foot of the bed, his eyes once again lifting to that corner, but this time there was a sense of readiness about him, a protector standing guard with technology as his ally. Alex lay down, the camera's presence somehow making the room feel less haunted, yet the anticipation of what it might capture hung heavily in the air. He thought about setting alarms to wake himself periodically, to check on Max, to look at the camera feed, but decided against it. If there was something to see, the camera would see it, and if it was nothing, then perhaps he could find peace in that certainty. As he drifted into sleep, the room's silence was different, charged with the potential for revelation. The camera's infrared light was a silent promise that in the morning there would be answers, or at least a clearer picture of what shared this space with him. The night was not just a time for rest, but for discovery, for the unveiling of truths long hidden in the shadows of the widow's watch. Morning came not with the gentle coaxing of sunlight, but with the abrupt intrusion of reality. Alex awoke with the weight of anticipation pressing against his chest. He had slept, but it was a sleep marred by dreams that felt more like memories. Not his own, but of the house, its corridors whispering stories of those who had come before. Max stirred beside him, his gaze no longer fixed on the corner, but now on Alex, a silent question in his eyes. Alex patted him, finding comfort in the familiar, in the warmth of his companion's breath against his hand. He turned towards the camera, still standing vigilant on its tripod, a modern sentinel in this room of old ghosts. His heart thudded as he approached, the digital screen coming to life with a touch, revealing the night's secrets in monochrome. He fast-forwarded through hours of him sleeping, the room silent except for the soft, rhythmic breathing of man and dog. And then, around the witching hour, the frame shifted. Something changed. There was movement, slight at first, a shadow that didn't quite belong. It wasn't the play of light, but something with intent, something that moved independently. Alex paused the footage, his breath catching in his throat. The shadow was indistinct, almost as if it was trying to avoid being captured by the camera's unyielding gaze. He played it again, watching as the shadow took shape beside him on the bed, a figure of darkness, its edges blurring into the room but undeniably there. It did not move with the air currents or the natural sway of light. It was deliberate, watching over him as he slept, a guardian or perhaps a spectre from another time. The figure was faceless, its form more a suggestion than a clear image, but it was there, next to him, where no one should have been. Alex's stomach twisted with a mix of horror and fascination. Max, in the footage, had his ears perked, his eyes unblinking as he watched the same spot, a silent witness to the unseen visitor. The figure seemed to lean in closer to Alex, its presence almost palpable through the screen. There was no malice in its posture, no threat, just an intense observation, as if studying the living with a curiosity born of long solitude. Alex felt a chill, the kind that seeps into your bones when you realize you're not alone, even when you felt utterly isolated. He continued to watch, the figure remaining for minutes, its presence unwavering. And then, just as subtly as it appeared, it began to fade, the shadow dissolving into the room's natural darkness, leaving no trace it had ever been there. The room returned to its quiet, empty state, but the disturbance of its presence lingered like a scent after someone leaves. Alex exhaled, his mind racing with questions. Who or what was this figure? Was it a remnant of someone who couldn't leave this house, or something else entirely? The rational part of him sought to explain it away. A play of light, a trick of the camera's lens, perhaps even a figment of his own imagination projected onto the footage. But the deeper, more primal part of him knew better. It knew the truth was often far stranger. Max, sensing Alex's unease, pressed closer, his body a warm, reassuring presence. The dog seemed to understand the significance of what they had both seen, or at least felt, the night before. Alex saved the footage, his hands trembling slightly, not just with fear but with the thrill of discovery, of confronting the unknown. He couldn't help but feel a kinship with this shadowy figure. Had it been watching him out of loneliness? Or was there a message, a warning in its silent vigil? The questions multiplied, each one leading to more, opening doors in his mind to rooms of speculation he had not known existed. The house, with its history and its secrets, now felt like a puzzle, and Alex was determined to piece it together. The camera had not just recorded an event, it had opened his eyes to the fact that the Widow's Watch was not merely a house, but a keeper of stories, of presences that lingered long after their physical forms had departed. As the morning light grew stronger, casting away the last vestiges of night's shadows, Alex knew he could not leave this alone. The fear was still there, a constant companion, but so was curiosity, a driving, insatiable curiosity that would push him to delve deeper into the mystery of the house and the figure from the footage. This was more than just a haunting. It was a beckoning into the past, into realms where the line between the living and the other was as thin as the veil of night. The revelation from the camera had ignited a fire within Alex, a need to understand not just the figure that had watched over him, but the very soul of the Widow's Watch. The house, he realized, was not merely a structure but a repository of stories, a silent keeper of its past inhabitants' secrets. With this realization came an insatiable curiosity, compelling him to unearth the history that now seemed to envelop him like the walls of the mansion itself. The library became his sanctuary, a place where the air was thick with the scent of old paper and ink, where time seemed to have slowed to a crawl. Alex cleared a space on the large oak desk, positioning himself under the old lamp's light, its green shade casting a focused glow on the materials he had gathered. He started with the oldest records he could find, deeds of the property dating back to the 19th century. The house had changed hands several times, each owner leaving their mark, their story intertwined with the mansion's. The original builder was a wealthy merchant who'd sought solitude in his later years, building the Widow's Watch as a tribute to his late wife, or so the story went. Alex's fingers traced over yellowed newspaper clippings, articles about the house, some with titles that hinted at tragedy. Mysterious disappearance at the Widow's Watch, the vanishing family of the old mansion. Each article was a breadcrumb leading him deeper into the mansion's shadowed past. One story, in particular, caught his attention, a report from the early 20th century. A renowned artist, Edward Sinclair, had lived in the house, creating works that were said to have a life of their own. The article noted how Sinclair often spoke of his muse, a spectral figure he claimed watched over him as he painted. The description of this muse bore an eerie similarity to the shadow in Alex's footage. Alex delved into the library's more arcane sections, finding books on local folklore and supernatural phenomena. One book, Echoes of the Past, discussed how some places could hold on to the spirits of those who had once lived there, their presence imprinted on the very fabric of the house, especially if their lives were cut short or left unresolved. The tales of hauntings, while intriguing, were met with skepticism by Alex's analytical mind. Yet, as he read accounts of cold spots, unexplained sounds, and sightings of figures in Victorian dress, he couldn't dismiss the parallels to his own experiences. There was a pattern, a recurring theme of watching, of being observed by something just beyond the veil of the visible world. The more he read, the more he felt the house's history was not just a series of events, but a narrative still unfolding, with him as the latest chapter. He found journals, diaries of past residents, some entries cryptic, suggesting they too felt the house was alive with more than just memories. One diary belonged to a woman named Margaret, who wrote of feeling watched, especially at night. Her entries grew increasingly fearful, speaking of a presence that seemed to guide her, protect her, yet also instill a profound sense of loneliness, as if it yearned for something she couldn't give. The connection to his camera footage was too compelling to ignore. Alex wondered if Margaret, like Sinclair, had encountered the same entity. Was it a guardian spirit, or perhaps a soul bound to the house, seeking some form of release or recognition? He also stumbled upon a map of the estate, which highlighted areas of the property that had been altered or expanded over the years. One section, near the garden, was marked as an old chapel, now buried under time and overgrowth. Could this have been where the spiritual energy of the house originated? Perhaps a place where the veil between worlds was thin? As the day drew on, Alex's research took him from the tangible to the theoretical. He explored theories of quantum physics, the idea that time could be non-linear, that the past and present could coexist, creating echoes where spirits and memories played out their existence. The weight of the house's history pressed upon him, each story adding to the complexity of the puzzle. He felt both exhilarated and burdened by the knowledge that his home was not just bricks and mortar, but a living, breathing entity with its own desires and perhaps its own consciousness. When evening approached, Alex's eyes were tired, but his mind was ablaze with questions. He knew he needed to confront this presence, not out of fear, but with a desire to understand, to communicate. The house was not just a place to live, it was a mystery to solve, a story to complete. With the library's shadows deepening, Alex felt the presence more than ever, as if the house itself was leaning in, listening to his every thought, waiting for him to take the next step. He understood now that the Widow's Watch was not just a house but a keeper of souls, and he had unwittingly become part of its narrative. The night had come again, bringing with it the weight of the unseen, the palpable sense of being observed. Alex had prepared for this moment, his mind a whirlwind of theories, stories, and the undeniable evidence from the camera footage. The presence in the house was no longer a question of if, but of what and why. He had positioned himself in the center of the room, the bed behind him now a stage from which he would confront the entity that had shared his nights. Max sat beside him, his usual vigilance heightened, his eyes occasionally darting to the corner of the ceiling as if he too could sense the tension building in the room. The candle's flame was the only source of light, its dance creating an atmosphere both serene and foreboding. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind that precedes a storm or a revelation. Alex had learned from his research that direct engagement could sometimes bring clarity or resolution to hauntings. Tonight, he would speak, not to the emptiness of the room, but to the presence he knew was there. With a deep breath, Alex began to speak, his voice steady despite the undercurrent of fear. I know you're here. I've seen you, or at least I've seen what you allow me to see. I don't know who you are, but I feel you watching, always watching. What do you want? What can I do for you? The words hung in the air, each one a ripple in the room's silence. Max's ears perked up, his head tilting as if he too was listening for a response. The shadows, perhaps in response or merely in the play of the candlelight, seemed to shift, to listen. Alex waited, the silence stretching, the only sounds were his own breathing and the soft crackle of the candle. He felt foolish, speaking to the air, yet there was a conviction in his words, a need to bridge the gap between his world and whatever lay beyond. I'm not here to harm you, he continued, his voice gaining strength. This house, it's full of stories, of lives lived. Are you part of that? Are you stuck here, needing help to move on? I've read about you, about this place. Artists, lovers, the lost. Did you know them? Are you one of them? The room seemed to hold its breath, the atmosphere charged with something akin to expectation. The candle flickered as if a breeze had passed, though the windows were closed tight. Alex's gaze never wavered from the corner, the place where the presence seemed to linger. Then a whisper, or perhaps just the wind, but it felt too close, too deliberate. It was like hearing someone speak just on the edge of comprehension, a voice that was there and not there. Max's fur bristled, his growl low, his eyes locked on the same spot, confirming to Alex that he wasn't imagining things. "Who are you?" Alex asked again, his voice firm now, demanding an answer from the shadows. The air grew colder, a chill that wasn't natural for the room. He could feel the presence not just in the corner, but as if it was now all around him, enveloping the room with its essence. There was a sense of watching, of being studied in return. Alex felt as if the entity was considering him, weighing his intentions. He sensed not malice, but a deep, abiding curiosity, a longing perhaps. "I want to understand," Alex said, his tone softening. "If you can hear me, if you can communicate, show me something, anything, a sign, a message. Help me understand why you're here, why you watch." The candle flame wavered violently, casting shadows that danced wildly across the walls, giving the room a life of its own. For a moment, the shadows seemed to form shapes, figures perhaps, or just the imagination playing tricks. Then, as suddenly as the disturbance began, it calmed, the flame returning to a gentle flicker. Alex's heart was pounding, not from fear alone, but from the thrill of contact, however subtle. He realized that this wasn't just about confronting a ghost. It was about engaging with the history of the house, with the stories that had become part of its very structure. He lay back down. The cold receded, leaving the room feeling empty once more. Max relaxed beside him, his head now resting on Alex's leg, a silent guardian through the night. Alex knew that this was not the end, but merely the beginning of a dialogue, a connection with the past that had been severed by time, but was now being tentatively re-established. As he drifted into sleep, he felt that he had not only spoken to the presence, but had also acknowledged it, given it a voice in his life, however faint. The house, in its silent way, seemed to sigh, as if relieved to have someone finally ask the question it had longed to answer. The night had settled in, an oppressive blanket over the widow's watch. The tension that had been building between the known and the unknown was now palpable. Alex had tried to find sleep, the weight of the house's history and its unseen occupant pressing down on him. But sleep was elusive, his mind too alert, too aware of the presence that had become a nightly visitor. Max, who had been lying quietly, suddenly jerked awake. His head lifted, his ears pricked up, and a low, rumbling growl began to resonate from his chest. The change in his demeanor was instant, from calm to defensive, his body tense, ready for confrontation. Alex sat up, the bed springs creaking under his weight, the sound echoing in the vast, silent room. "What is it, boy?" he whispered, his voice barely above a breath, not wanting to disturb whatever Max was reacting to. The dog's gaze was locked on that familiar corner where the shadows seemed to converge. The room's air grew colder, an unnatural chill that seemed to seep from the walls, from the very essence of the house. The candle on the nightstand had long since extinguished, leaving only the moon's pale light to illuminate Max's form, transforming his fur into a silver outline against the darkness. Max's growl grew louder, a warning to whatever lurked in the shadows. Alex could feel the fur on his arms rise in response to the atmosphere, to the primal fear of the unseen. He reached out, his hand finding the comforting solidity of Max's back, feeling the muscles tense under his touch. "What do you see, Max?" Alex asked, his voice firm now, trying to instill confidence in both himself and his companion. The dog didn't turn, didn't acknowledge Alex's touch, his focus unyielding. The shadows at the ceiling corner seemed to shift, to writhe as if disturbed by Max's growl. Alex squinted, trying to discern movement, to catch a glimpse of what had captured Max's attention. His heart pounded in his chest, a drumbeat of anticipation and fear. Then a noise, faint but distinct, like the rustle of fabric or perhaps a whisper that carried no words, just an intent. It was as if the presence was responding, not in a way Alex could comprehend, but in a manner that Max could sense. The dog's growl turned into a howl, a sound that seemed to echo through the house, reverberating off its ancient walls. The air felt charged, as if a storm was brewing within the confines of the room. Alex's breath formed small clouds in front of him, the temperature dropping further, an indication that something was indeed there, manifesting in ways beyond the physical. He stood up, moving to stand beside Max, his eyes now also fixed on the corner. "Show yourself," Alex demanded, his voice carrying more command than fear. He needed to confront this, not just for his own peace, but for Max's, who was clearly agitated by whatever was present. The room seemed to respond. The shadows, which had been playing a subtle dance, now moved with purpose, gathering, thickening at the point where both man and dog stared. There was a sense of something gathering strength, or perhaps courage, in the face of their defiance. Max's aggression was not just a reaction, it was a call to action, a challenge. Alex felt the weight of the moment, the need to act, to protect, to understand. He took a step forward, Max moving with him, their unity a silent pact against the unknown. The cold intensified, and with it, the feeling that the house itself was observing, its walls holding their breath, waiting for the outcome of this standoff. The presence felt different now, less of an observer and more of an entity that was being forced into action. A sudden gust, as if from nowhere, blew through the room, chilling to the bone. The candle on the nightstand flickered to life, though no hand had touched it, casting an eerie, flickering light that danced across the walls, revealing the shadows in stark relief. Max's howl turned into a series of sharp barks, each one echoing like a beacon in the night, demanding attention, demanding presence. Alex, emboldened by Max's courage, spoke again, his voice a mix of request and command. "If you're here, show yourself. We're not here to harm you, we just want to understand." The room seemed to hold still, the air thick with potential. The shadows in the corner swirled, a vortex of darkness that seemed to pulse with life, with consciousness. And then there was a sense of retreat. Not a physical movement, but an ebbing of the presence, as if the entity had decided to withdraw, to watch from a distance once more. Max's barks ceased, his body relaxing slightly, but his eyes remained vigilant. Alex felt a mix of relief and disappointment. Relief that the immediate threat seemed to have passed, but disappointment that the confrontation had not yielded the answers he sought. As the room returned to a semblance of normalcy, the cold receding, Alex knew this was not the end of their interaction with the house's ghostly inhabitant. Max had not just reacted. He had communicated in his own way, perhaps even warded off something that was not yet ready to reveal itself fully. The night's events had shifted the dynamics, pushing the boundaries of the unseen towards the seen, setting the stage for further encounters, for understanding, or for something even more profound. The night Max had shown such aggression had left Alex with a profound sense of urgency. The house, with its unseen occupant, was not just a place of mystery, but of interaction. The entity was not a passive observer, but something with its own agency, capable of responding, of withdrawing. This realization had led Alex to a resolve, not just to coexist, but to engage, to open a dialogue with whatever shared this space with him. After days of research, Alex had concluded that a ritual might be the key to either banishing the presence or, more preferably, understanding it. He had found references in old books, accounts of similar occurrences where communication was sought with the spirits of a place. The idea was not to exercise but to invite, to negotiate a peaceful coexistence, or perhaps find closure for the entity. The room was prepared with care, not for a haunting, but for a meeting. Alex had spent the day gathering materials, from candles to incense, each item chosen for its symbolic significance. He arranged the candles in a circle, representing unity and continuity. The incense, when lit, filled the room with a scent that was both calming and otherworldly, a bridge between realms. With Max by his side, Alex began to draw symbols on the walls using chalk, each one a piece of an ancient language meant to call forth or to protect. The symbols were from various traditions, a mishmash of his understanding, designed not just to summon, but to communicate safely. The book he held was a collection of rituals and spells found in the mansion's library, its pages worn from time. It wasn't just a guide, it felt like a key, a means to unlock the secrets held within the widow's watch. Alex opened it to a specific page, one that spoke of communing with the spirits, his finger tracing the words, feeling their weight. The atmosphere in the room was charged, as if the air itself was anticipating the ritual. Max's demeanor was different tonight, not aggressive but alert, sensing the gravity of the moment, perhaps understanding his role as a guardian during this exposure to the unknown. Alex began to read aloud from the book, his voice resonating through the room, each word a note in a song meant for the ears of the unseen. "Spirits of this house, hear me now. I call upon you, not in anger or fear, but in search of understanding. Show yourself, share your story, so we might live in peace or part in understanding." The candles flickered as if in response, the flames bending towards the corner where the presence was often felt. The incense smoke seemed to gather, forming shapes that could be interpreted as faces or hands reaching out from the shadows. The temperature dropped, the familiar chill signaling the entity's presence. Max's ears perked up, his head tilting as if listening to a conversation just beyond human hearing. The room felt alive, the walls themselves humming with an energy that was palpable. Alex continued, his voice steady. "You who watch, you who linger, I offer you this space, this moment to reveal yourself. Let us speak, let us heal what needs healing. If you are bound here, let us find a way to free you." The shadows in the corner seemed to swell, to take on a denser form. There was a sense of gathering, of the presence manifesting more strongly than ever before. The air grew thick with whispers, not just in Alex's mind, but around him, as if the room was speaking in tongues. Suddenly, objects in the room began to move. A book slid off a shelf, the pages flipping as if an invisible hand was searching for something. A picture on the wall swayed, the eyes within the frame seeming to watch, to follow Alex's every move. The house was responding, but whether in welcome or warning, Alex couldn't tell. Max's growl returned, but it was different, not aggressive, but a low, continuous sound. A warning, or perhaps a greeting to the unseen. The dog's fur stood on end, his body language suggesting he was communicating in his own way with whatever was here. Alex felt the presence more than he saw it. It was like standing in the eye of a storm, where everything around you is in motion, yet you are untouched. He closed his eyes, focusing not on sight, but on feeling, on the energy that filled the room. There was a moment of stillness, a profound silence where even the whispers ceased. Then, a touch, or rather, the sensation of a touch, cold and fleeting on his shoulder. Alex opened his eyes, half expecting to see someone beside him, but there was only the air, the candlelight, and Max, whose gaze was now on him, as if to say, "You're not alone." The ritual seemed to have opened a channel, not just of communication, but of empathy. Alex felt a rush of emotions, not his own, but borrowed, feelings of longing, of being trapped, of seeking something lost. He understood then that this wasn't just about his peace of mind, but about resolving something left unfinished. As the night waned, the presence began to recede, the room returning to its quiet state, the objects settling, the whispers fading. Alex knew this was not the end, but a step forward. The ritual had not banished the spirit. It had invited it closer, perhaps closer to resolution, to peace. As the first light of dawn crept into the room, piercing through the heavy curtains, Alex awoke with a sense of peace he hadn't felt since moving into the house. The night's ritual had changed the atmosphere. The air was no longer thick with anticipation, but felt clear, almost rejuvenated. Max, who had been vigilant throughout the night, now rested beside him, his breathing even, his body relaxed. The candles had burned down to stubs, their wax forming new patterns on the floor, a testament to their role in the night's events. The incense had long since smoldered away, leaving behind a faint, cleansing aroma. The symbols on the walls seemed less foreboding now, more like art than arcane warnings. Alex sat up, his movements slow, his mind still processing the night's encounter. He looked towards the corner where the presence had often lurked, expecting to feel the familiar chill, but there was nothing. Instead, there was a feeling of emptiness, not of absence, but of resolution, as if whatever had been there had found what it sought. His gaze shifted to the camera, which had stood witness to the unseen throughout the night. With a sense of curiosity mixed with trepidation, he approached it, pressing play on the digital screen. The footage was still, showing only him and Max in the room, the candles burning, the symbols on the walls. But as the night progressed, the camera captured subtle movements, whispers that seemed to come from all directions, and then, just before dawn, a shadow, less dense, less menacing, moving away from the corner, towards the walls, dissipating into the fabric of the house itself. Alex took a deep breath, the weight of the realization settling upon him. The entity had not left in the traditional sense. It had found peace, or perhaps a way to coexist without the need for such visible intrusions. The house felt different, lighter, as if it too had exhaled a breath held for too long. It was then that Max, with a newfound curiosity, or perhaps guided by an instinct, trotted over to a part of the wall that looked no different from the rest. He began to sniff and paw at it, his actions drawing Alex's attention. Upon closer inspection, Alex found a seam, a hidden door cleverly concealed within the ornate wood paneling. With a mixture of anticipation and respect for the house's secrets, Alex gently pushed the door. It creaked open, revealing a small, hidden chamber. The room was dusty, untouched by time, filled with relics of a life. Old photographs, a collection of letters tied with a faded ribbon, a small ornate key, and a portrait of a woman whose eyes seemed to hold a mix of sorrow and relief. The letters, when Alex picked them up, were written in a delicate script, the paper brittle with age. They spoke of love, of loss, of a woman named Eliza, who wrote of her life, her joys, her fears, and her final days, all within these walls. She had been an artist much like Edward Sinclair, and it was suggested she might have been his muse, perhaps even the same presence that had watched over Alex. One letter, dated near the end of her life, spoke of her fear of being forgotten, of her art, and her love being lost to time. It was a plea to whoever might find her words to remember her, to let her story live on. Alex realized this was the closure she sought, the reason for her lingering presence. The key, when used, opened a small chest in the corner of the room, inside of which were sketches, paintings, and a diary that detailed her life. These were the artifacts of her existence, her legacy that needed to be acknowledged, to be brought back into the light. Max watched, his tail wagging slightly as if he understood the significance of this discovery. Alex felt a connection, not just to the house, but to Eliza, to all those who had lived here, their stories now intertwined with his own. He decided then that he would share these findings, perhaps with a local historical society or through an exhibition, ensuring Eliza's art and story were known. It was his way of honoring her, of completing the cycle that had kept her bound to the widow's watch. As he stepped back into the bedroom, the house felt alive, not with the chill of the unseen, but with the warmth of stories told and remembered. The presence was not gone, but it had evolved, becoming part of the mansion's soul rather than a lingering spirit. The light now filled the room, banishing the last vestiges of night's shadows. Alex knew that this was not just the end of a haunting, but the beginning of a new chapter for him and the widow's watch. The house had given him not just a place to live, but a legacy to carry, a story to tell, and in doing so, it had found its own peace.